Welcome to episode 247 of the Refuse Fascism podcast, a podcast brought to you by volunteers with Refuse Fascism. I'm Sam Goldman, one of those volunteers and host of the show. Refuse Fascism works to unite all who can be united to join in mass nonviolent protests and resistance in the streets and throughout society, growing to include millions and refusing to stop until we create such a profound political crisis that Trump cannot impose his fascist program or even maintain his hold on power. Big thanks to our patrons, everyone who rates, reviews, shares the show, and reps our merch. Every bit helps connect more people with the movement. If you haven't yet, take a second to leave a review, share the show, or hit up our merch store. Today we're featuring Coco speech at the May Day protest in Houston, Texas, and some of the remarks given by Andy Z and myself at the Refuse Fascism Emergency Regional Assembly in New York City on Sunday, April 27th. But first, let's jump into the deep end of This Week in Fascism. A federal program seeking to remediate decades of raw sewage and human waste flooding the homes of people in Lowndes County, Alabama, has been ended by Trump because, according to the White House, the program was an example of quote-unquote illegal DEI. This is happening again and again to programs throughout the country and the world, but even this is chump change compared to their plans. Trump has officially proposed a budget that far exceeds the wildest dreams of Project 2025 and every cut that he has made so far. His budget would cut $163 billion from almost every part of government, except, of course, the military and the Department of Homeland Security. That's 1/5 of the entire non-defense budget. The EPA, the National Science Foundation, and the CDC would see their budgets slashed by more than half. PBS and PR funding gone. Budgets for housing and heating assistance, education, and health would all be slashed, with some programs entirely eliminated. On the other hand, the military budget would pass $1 trillion, and the Department of Homeland Security's budget would skyrocket, almost doubling. Much has been made of Republican dissent from this proposal and the fact that Trump put forward similar proposals every year of his first term. But let's be clear. The problem that the loudest voices of dissent are pouncing on is that the budget does not give enough money to the military. And even more to the point, the Republican Party, as bad as it was in 2020, is a whole different monster now. All meaningful dissenters have been purged. The majority in both houses have promised not to respect any election they lose and have turned the GOP into a streamlined fascist machine, rising to meet their cruel leaders' demands at every turn. Meanwhile, the defining action of Chuck Schumer's current term has been to cave specifically on a fascist budget proposal. And we have Democrats like John Fetterman and Alyssa Slotkin dutifully paving the way for fascism to triumph. What is standing in the way of this budget becoming a reality? Almost nothing, except us. We've officially passed the 100-day mark, a moment for the news media and talking heads to reflect on how they've gotten all this so wrong for so long, right? Hell no. They aren't even putting out anything new, even amongst many who oppose Trump's policies. The united line is that Trump is inept, that he cannot govern, and that his poll numbers are tanking. You might think people that are paid to pay attention might be recognizing that the full-throttle fascism that has run roughshod over the rule of law, that has defied the Supreme Court, and even arrested a sitting judge who didn't enthusiastically comply to ICE's fascist demands, that terrorizes and dehumanizes immigrants, putting up lawn signs lining the White House driveway bearing the photos of allegedly undocumented immigrants, the charges against them, and the word emblazoned on each one in all caps, arrested, putting their heads on pikes, straight up fascist bullshit. A regime that has sent hundreds of men, most likely to their deaths, in a Salvadoran concentration camp, let alone dangerously overcrowding ICE's domestic dungeons. deporting children who are U.S. citizens, splitting families apart, and putting the lives of young children in peril, including deporting an American child receiving cancer treatment, that has won the subservience of powerful law firms and a prestigious Ivy University, that says,
children will be taught to love America. Children will be taught to be patriots. Children will be taught civic values for schools that want federal taxpayer funding. So as we close the Department of Education and we provide funding to states, we are going to make sure that these funds are not being used to promote communist ideology.
That has stripped life-saving funds from countless programs here and around the world, that is causing climate change projections to go berserk through monstrous deregulation and targeted destruction of our shared environment, and which is undercutting physical and organizational infrastructure in ways that may take years to come to deadly fruition, all in just 100 days. But instead, all of that deliberate cruelty, driving fast and furious down the road to a full-blown consolidated fascism, is way too often reduced to mindless, directionless, quote-unquote mayhem. Listen instead to comedian Amber Ruffin speaking on The View this week. As some might recall, Amber is the comedian who was disinvited as the host of this year's White House Correspondents' Dinner for not both-siding fascism.
People are saying that Trump did a bad job 100 days in. I strongly disagree. This man has done everything he has set out to do.
Right.
I'm Black. I'm terrified. I'm scared for my trans friends. And people who we know and love, our neighbors, are disappeared. And that was the goal, and he did it. He did it. He did exactly what he wanted to do, because I feel less welcome in my home than I did last year. And that's the goal. That was the goal. This feeling in us is the point.
Do you think the American people go along with that? Do they want people to be disappeared?
Do they get what they voted for?
They
do now.
You know, I do. People are like, ha, 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 isn't this funny? You voted for Trump and you lost your job. Ha, ha, ha.
Isn't that funny?
And I'm like, what was the math there? Because if I'm talking trash about immigrants and then I'm disappearing them, what did you think I was going to do? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm terrified for our autistic family members. Because didn't RFK Jr. say registry? Oh, my gosh. So look, I'm like everybody else waking up in the middle of the night going, the children. And I don't have any.
That's right.
Listen as well to Mohsen Mahdawi, the Palestinian green card holder and Columbia University student that was freed on Wednesday after more than 2 weeks of being detained. Mahdawi was ordered to be deported by the Trump administration on April 14th, despite not having been prosecuted for any crime and without any due process. This Columbia University philosophy student was arrested by masked ICE agents in Vermont during what should have been his citizenship naturalization interview. Listen to what Mahdawi said in his op-ed for the New York Times. Quote, once the repression of dissent in the name of security becomes a key objective of a government, authoritarian rule and even martial law are not far off. When they look at my case, all Americans should ask themselves, what is left of our democracy and who will be targeted next? End quote. There are millions of people living in this country who do not want to see Trump's future. But as long as they are led to believe, and as long as many desperately cling to, the belief that Trump is a dud or a clown or crazy, we will not be able to take the action necessary to stop this regime. It's true that Trump has not succeeded across the board, and that there have even now been important moments of mass resistance and even institutional opposition. These are extremely important, and they can become an integral part of leading towards the removal of this regime. But to think that the obstacles Trump has faced so far prove that his fascist vision isn't going anywhere or that it can't succeed, that's deadly. We want to salute those who took to the streets in protest this May Day, and we want to share with you Coco, a national leader of RefuseFascism.org, speaking at the protest in Houston, Texas. Have a listen.
You all look beautiful and you sound beautiful. If you feel this, repeat after me. Trump must go now.
Trump must go now.
In the name of humanity.
In the name of humanity.
We refuse to accept a fascist America.
We refuse to accept a fascist America.
That's right. What we are facing is fascism, and I don't care if Donald Trump was elected, Hitler was elected, he came into power through the normal channels. Fascism is never legitimate. And it is our responsibility. It is our responsibility. And actually, there is a force in this country that has the power to stop this regime before it consolidates its rule. Do you know what that force is? That's right. It is us, the millions of people in this country who do not want to live in a fascist America, who do not want to see our immigrant brothers and sisters and siblings being rounded up and sent to torture prisons in El Salvador, who do not want to relegate women to becoming incubators, who do not want to force LGBTQ people back into the closet for them and for all of humanity.
Right.
Now is the time when we must rise up and act to stop the consolidation of Trump MAGA fascism. Fascism is a different form of rule in this country with devastating consequences for people here and around the world. It is radically oppressive and repressive, and fascism has direction and momentum. You see what they've done in the next 100 days. Imagine what they can do in the next 100 if we do not get into the streets, stay in the streets, call everyone you know who cannot stand, who's waking up in agony over what's happening, call them back into the streets and tell them that if we demand that the Trump fascist regime must go now, we actually have the power to stop this. We do not accept their future. There can be no conciliation or collaboration between the world we want and the country they want. We have no common cause with MAGA fascism. But look, waiting for the next elections will be too late. We have the power now. We need to come back into the streets now. Millions of people from different perspectives in nonviolent, sustained protests, just like they did in South Korea. No backing down, not relenting until this regime is gone from power. I'm going to read from A Call to Conscience, A Call to Act from refusefascism.org. I'm on the national board of refusefascism.org, and if you want to get involved, you should come talk to me. But all of you, from your different organizations, from your different perspectives, we all have a role to play in projecting this demand from coast to coast, all over Texas, all over the U.S., and all over the world. We must organize and struggle as we have never before. We must not allow ourselves to be divided and conquered. We must unite all who can be united from many different viewpoints and perspectives to foster and draw on a collective spirit of courage and righteous fury and willingness to make the necessary sacrifices for the greater good of defeating this fascism. We, in our millions, are a force powerful enough to defeat Trump MAGA fascism. Let the world see our determination and courage and hear our righteous demand. This is a call to conscience, call to act that you should go to refusefascism.org and sign. And right now, I want you to take a pledge with me. You put your fist up in the air and say no.
No!
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 In the name of humanity.
In the name of humanity.
We refuse to accept.
We refuse to accept
a fascist America.
a fascist America.
Trump must go now.
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 Thank you.
If you haven't already, read, sign, and spread A Call to Conscience, A Call to Act at refusefascism.org/act. On April 27th, Refuse Fascism held emergency organizing assemblies in New York City, Chicago, and LA. I was proud to be at the meeting in New York City and appreciated the rich insights and inspired action people took up right away. It was wonderful meeting listeners of the podcast and meeting a Berklee School of Music student who just started listening to the pod and is interested in contributing some music for the show. Here is commentary from Andy Z and myself during a discussion on why Trump must go and must go now.
The reason that they don't want you to say Hitler is because it hits home. And the Democrats do the same thing. We can't say Hitler. They can't even decide whether or not they should really take on issues like immigration or anything that gets to the essence of what's happening now, because all they are really concerned, I'm talking about the top leadership of it, all they're really concerned about is preserving the norms of a system norms that Trump will not respect and that he's actually working to shred. Okay? And so this is important. They don't want you to say this. They don't want you to say fascist. Let's just call it white nationalism. No, that doesn't quite capture it. So maybe we'll say authoritarianism. Anything but fascism, because if you name what it is, it does two things. And it works for you here. It will work for us, because it describes what we're actually facing. And when you understand the reality that you actually face, then you can figure out what are the means to be able to deal with it. Okay? That's very important in substance. They don't want you to be able to say that, and to be able to understand that, and to make it describe things accurately. In terms of returning to 62, I hear you, but to be maybe even a little more accurate, it's a return more to 1859. Let's be clear, this is the Confederacy that you see out there. Okay? Some pamphlets in the back from Mahdawi again. Look at social media post 115. He brings out that point. If you don't believe that, if you think that's just rhetoric, why are they renaming the military bases after Confederate generals? Why are the statues going back up?
You're clearing out the African American History Museum as we speak. That's right.
You got my next point. Exactly. They're actually taking the history of slavery and wiping it, and the history of the genocide of the Native people, the history of Asian people. They're wiping all that history out, which is necessary to do if you want to wipe those people out. And we shouldn't feel like we're being alarmist in saying this. What Mahdawi also says is that actually he's more dangerous than Hitler. Why? Because Hitler was coming to power in a defeated country, defeated in World War I, a country in tremendous economic crisis. He got appointed through legal means to be the prime minister or by the president of the Reichstag. And Trump is leading the most powerful military in human history, the most powerful economy in human history, as much as he's trying to destroy it, such as what it's been based on, but that's another conversation. But we have to understand this is even more dangerous, and that's not exaggeration. These are questions that we should come up and discuss, but we're not wrong in saying this is fascism. It's quite accurate to say that. And I think we have to go to, and Sam's going to want to say some things too, when we say in the longer call that fascism is not a curse word, the reason that Coco does, and I put that in there, because a lot of times there are people, increasingly, including very prominent people, starting to throw the word around, and that's a good thing for us. But it also has specific meaning. It's not just, well, we went from white nationalists to authoritarians, now we'll say fascism, I don't really get it. No, it actually got, yes, but it also has specific meaning. We have to really think about radically oppressive and repressive, but important essence of it is the rule of law is shattered. The rule of law is shattered. This is an essential question. A lot of things preceded. Jason Stanley talks about truth being destroyed first. He talks about all kinds of things that people have spoken, the brutality. You saw that, the fear factor of the Proud Boys, of what happened on January 6th. All of that is preparing people for what's coming. It's all part of it. Jim earlier spoke of the normalizing of you get used to all this stuff. But the essence of it is the destruction of the rule of law. Once that's destroyed, once dissent can be criminalized on the basis of the say-so of the fascist regime, you are in a different game. It's not a game, obviously, but you're in a different game at that point. The stakes go up. It doesn't mean we're going to stop fighting, but we're going to be fighting from a much, much more difficult position. The longer you wait, the more things get consolidated, the more things get normalized on the one hand, and the institutions that are being purged of anybody who has any dissent to this policy, the core of it that is now fascist, is being consolidated. Now, some of us saw this on Inauguration Day. Where did Trump go? Does anybody know? Where did he speak? He spoke at the CIA. Now, I'll just tell you, I told you a little bit of my background. The CIA is not my favorite organization. Okay? Nor are CIA agents. But what I did recognize, and we recognized at that time, that what he was there for is saying that this agency's been taken over by people who care about the people of the world, or in some ways want to use diplomacy to deal with things. He was purging that as he's purged the FBI, the police agencies. He's already attacked the courts. This is a fascist form of dictatorship that is consolidated, and it has to be stopped before it's consolidated. That's the essence of the question. And there's many components of it. Why? Because they've got a program of white supremacy, that's the Confederacy, patriarchy, which was one of their most important moves in taking away the right to be a full human being in the world by stripping away the right to abortion. They're going to go after birth control. They're going to make it national if they get their way and outlaw mifepristone, which is what the majority of abortions, it's a pill, it's medically induced abortion in the early terms of pregnancy. They have literally a handmaid's tale for women. We see what they're doing to immigrants in the jungle of El Salvador. And we see, back to the point of it's a stripping away of the rule of law, when he says to Bukale, we've got homegrown radicals, build 5 more prisons. And then I'm not sure if it was, who exactly was that? Maybe it was Kristi Noem or whoever it was down there, said there's going to be mattresses for the homegrown radicals, which tells you what? That she's making a joke, maybe, but actually, what she's actually saying is all this has been discussed, all this is being planned. This is real. It's our job to wake people up. My last comment is this. When we restarted Refuse Fascism right after the inauguration, our organization, we had principally resided in Sam doing, not that we were all still part of the editorial board, but mainly resided in doing a podcast and informing people on this couple hundred interviews she's done with all kinds of experts, and this is really a valuable resource. But there was really an ed board of 5 people. So in about 8 weeks, there's 300 people who are meeting, and we've led thousands of people in protests. This can mushroom, and it needs to mushroom. You should recognize, just as I said to the 4,000 people in DC, you need to look at yourselves, and then you'll see why this is possible. We here need to look at ourselves and see how the 100 or so here and the close to 100 in the 2 other cities that are meeting, look at yourselves and say, we can do this. We can wake the people up. So you want to say a few things, and then I haven't forgotten the question of how could we actually do this? Because what I want to do is talk about this first point, what it is, which has everything to do with why it must go. If we get a basic position on that, then we can talk about how it could be stopped and why the bedrock of stopping that is moving millions into the streets in nonviolent protests.
So to continue on the theme of the must go, I just wanted to say a couple things about must go now, adding on to what Andy said, and speak to a theme that was within, I think I counted 8 people's comments, humanity. And I just have to start off by saying it speaks volumes of this movement that you are a part of, that even in the conversation of the demand Trump must go now, many of you spoke to humanity as part of why it must go now. So I think it's important to speak to. Andy had talked about confronting fully that this is fascism, and that is why it must go and why it must go now. One of the aspects of it being fascism is this triad that Andy was talking about. The white supremacy, the male supremacy, the American hegemony, the American first mentality. And you see that in the not even 100 days that he's been in. That program is clear. The emphasis on the rule of law and the emphasis on people understanding that once it's consolidated, you don't have the right to protest. You don't have the avenues of redress that even if you are able to identify are very limited in this society in terms of dissent, especially for whole groups of people. They exist. And when you have fascism, you don't. Within the halls of power, we've already seen them be eliminated, the disregarding Supreme Court rulings being one of them. But you also see it in people's our ability to act in the streets. You look at all the states that already have laws that restrict protests or that say, okay, you can run protesters over with your car. And that's what they're going for, full scale, nationwide. And there's a window of time where you can act. There's a window of time where you must act. And that window is now. In addition to the fact that this regime is barreling ahead, and you see it. You see it when you have two-year-olds, toddlers, having to defend themselves in immigration court, babies, not allowed legal counsel. You see that in the fact that this regime sends their FBI to arrest a judge because she showed an immigrant, allegedly, a way out of the courtroom, because this regime says you can arrest people at courthouses, at schools, at churches, at hospitals. This is unfolding very quickly. It's part of what's shaking people. And people are moving. And this is the other part of why this is a moment to seize. Because many people are making the connections. Many people, especially, but not only, the legal community and universities who have gotten under increased attack are saying, we're in new territory now. But if we're in new territory now, we have to be demanding that the whole regime goes now. If we're in new territory now, it can't be hanging on to one institution and you hang on to the other institution. And maybe we'll sign statements of solidarity, but we'll just, try to hang on for as long as we can. Because this regime doesn't care. They will bulldoze over it all. But and we'll talk about this more, there is a force that's much harder for them to bulldoze. And it's the people. And so we'll get more into that, but I did want to speak briefly about the humanity because it connects to the call. In the longer version, one of the things that I really appreciate, and if people haven't read it in full, they should, is that it speaks to not only the humanity of those that this regime is deeming as subhuman, but our humanity. And what happens to us as a people if we rise up and do what history is calling us to do, which is drive this regime for power, but also what happens to us as people if we allow this, of who we become. And that's another part of why we gotta do this now. For all the lives that are in the crosshairs of this regime, for future generations, yes, and for who we will become as a people.
One thing to think about is, why is the Trump fascist regime must go now a very positive message? Seems like it's a negative message. We must go now. It's negative. We're criticizing something. Exactly, it's positive because of what it is and what it represents and how we actually could win. There's two things I wanted to speak about. One, Sam was just touching on it, and I spoke a little bit about last weekend. To defeat this, the people need to take the offensive. Right now, we're principally on the defensive. The capitulation and conciliation and accommodation with fascism is stunning people around the world. It actually shouldn't, because there's actually a long history. They have a much rosier picture of their own resistance, but that, I don't want to get into demeaning the French people or anybody else who had a chance to fight fascism and didn't either, including the Germans. But nonetheless, I said this before. Yeah, the universities should resist. The lawyers should resist. Healthcare workers should be giving the care they need to trans youth. They should be giving the care to immigrants. This idea that where were you born is the first question when you enter an emergency room. Fuck you. No, this is no good. But if we fight each battle, by definition and by our action, we're going to be reacting to what they do. Here, then there, and as somebody cited earlier, Steve Bannon said right from the beginning, flood the zone. And you're going to throw them off balance. And then you'll have a disgusting, putrid spectacle of Democrats debating whether or not they should stand up for people's fundamental rights, whether it be useful to them to get reelected. Do you realize how immoral that is? Anybody who follows that's got to have their head examined and their morality and their conscience, including around the genocide in Gaza, for God's sake. So I think going after the whole thing is taking the offensive. They come after one person. They come after one institution. We go to that struggle and we say, the Trump fascist regime must go. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept the fascist in America. Yes, free whoever is the latest, now a 2-year-old. Yes, we should say their names. But the problem is a bigger problem than that one person. Not that we shouldn't fight for different people, but even Mahmoud has said that, it's not about me. Issued a beautiful statement from Colombia, Mahmoud Khalil, saying this is about everybody who's being detained. That's right. And it's about even more than that. We have a beautiful statement. Trump must go. Because it's actually comprehending all of this, and it enables the masses of people to take the offensive against this regime. And that's part of the answer of how we can beat this, okay? But it's not the whole answer, because it's a complex question. One thing to recognize, and this, I think his name is Leonard Pitts. I think I said it on the weekend. It was the Miami Times. The newspaper in Miami is the Miami Herald. But he wrote a column. This is really two countries in one border. And as I said, Bob Avakian, mentioned him before, wrote, this is a very important thing to understand. There is a country of maybe, I don't know if it's 25 or 40 million people who really want to return to the Confederacy. It's bros who want to be able to say with absolute impunity and a fucking smirk on their face, your body, my choice. Does that have anything in common with what anybody in this room feels? You could say that to somebody and think it's funny and think it's your right. There's no accommodation to this. It's not boys will be boys and racists will be racist. No, there's no common ground here. So that's one thing to understand. The only conciliation or reconciliation or reaching across the aisle that can be done with this people is going to be on the terms of the fascists. And we've seen that over and over and over again in the governing institutions. All right, so this is going to get very clear. But what's the other side of that equation? It's the humanity that you were just speaking about. What we've called the decent people are actually the majority, including many of the decent people don't even vote. That's where they're at right now, because they feel that there's no real recourse within that. Leave that aside for right now, but except to recognize it's 330 million people in the country. There's a lot of people who don't want this, but are looking for it and have been trained to look at who first? Me. That's who I got to worry about, me. And if I'm very generous, I'll worry about my kids and my family and my block and my neighborhood and my people. All of it comes back down to me. And that's destroying us because we're all in this together. Okay, and especially if you think for 5 minutes and do a tiny bit of research, think about the climate, you know that it is not respecting national borders. This is some serious business. We're speaking the interests of humanity, so where does this tie back? We need to lead those millions of people as they come into motion, and they're starting to come into motion for all the conciliation, all the accommodation, for the object lesson of the abject capitulation of Columbia University, for which they got absolutely nothing. They didn't get their $400 million back. They just got the fact that now you can come in and beg a little bit more, and we're going to push you even further into a corner. Harvard finally stood up, and they have the resources to do it, but we can't rest complacent with that. It's an important step. What the lawyers need after the capitulation of the top firms who just were thinking about keeping their ExxonMobil clients is they need millions of people in the streets demanding this. So that's the first thing I want to make. There is a people who we can lead, and we need thousands of people to direct them where it needs to. We don't have to have everybody signed up, but we do need to have, in the sense of refuse fascism, we have to be able to be a force that can march into mass protests of millions of people and give people the way out. The demand has to be everywhere, understanding its positive impact. So just briefly on how we're going to do this, without distracting too much from still staying on this first thing. When it says make the country ungovernable by millions of people in the streets and continuing protests, I don't know exactly how that will happen. I know in every country where this has happened, it's been a little bit different. It's had different characteristics, what it actually looks like. I think last week, I said, I actually think this is Kim's idea. I said that she spoke back. I said, well, people work. Why don't we protest at night? Realizing that the South Koreans, that's what they did in the beginning. They went out after work and they protested. and we're going to hear later on from a student from Washington, D.C., where they started to do this something every night, and maybe it'll be 3 times a week. We'll have to figure it out, but it'll take different characteristics. When you have every part of society in turmoil, you are strengthening the people within these institutions who are unbelievably agonized, those who haven't been fired yet. How the hell well, I'm serious. There are a lot of people who have been fired, and people are in peril in their jobs. But there are some people who are standing up and saying no. And mainly what they're doing is resigning. Instead, they got, that's fine. But they also need people staying inside. No, we're not going to do this. Yes, we are going to go down where you can get all the interns and residents here. If the official staff doctors aren't willing to, we're going to go down there. We're going to pull the medicine out of the cabinet. Now arrest us for work doing this for these people. We're going to get there's a lot of things that people can do. Masha Gesser wrote in the New York Times, if they're trying to take over the universities, let's conduct classes out in the public spaces, in people's homes. We're going to resist this, and we're going to make the society ungovernable. We're going to make it impossible for him to actually, every move he makes, people will defy it. And they'll be in the streets. Business as usual won't happen, not because he's disrupting business as usual, but because we're disrupting business as usual. Now here's what we don't know. We don't know how the splits that exist at the top of society, particularly in the government, but also among those who really run things, these people, the so-called billionaires, which, by the way, the Democrats have as many billionaires as the Republicans. That's how Kamala Harris raised $1 billion like almost overnight. So it's the billionaires. That's just a whole wrong direction for things. It's fascism that we have to fight. You want to fight the oligarchy, we'll actually talk about what kind of economic system we have, and that's something we should talk about and argue about. And is a regulated capitalism the future for humanity, or is it a whole different economic system the future for humanity? But the point is, that's not just an aside, but it is actually sorting out what the problem is that we face right now. But you think about this, these people up top in the political sphere have a lot of differences among themselves. The more that people are in the streets, the more that there are people feeling the pressure of not just the primaries, but actually the whole thing could be falling apart. I just noted this morning that one of Obama's advisors has a big column in the Times today. Ben Rhodes, I believe he was Obama's advisor, wrote a column saying, actually, we're never going back to what it was before, and America's actually kind of in a lot of trouble here. How do we better do something to stop this? The Times is writing, believe it or not, an editorial. Shouldn't the U.S. denounce Erdogan, who's a fascist dictator who Trump greatly admires and who greatly admires Trump? There's stirrings up top. We can't rely on them. But how this goes, we don't actually know. You're not going to find a situation that I know I lived through where almost overnight, I think I was in theater at the time, and you get really busy when you're doing that, and all of a sudden it's a crisis with Nixon, and I said, well, they got this real piggy asshole from Baltimore, Spiro Agnew. Oh, no, they kicked him out last week. They always have a scandal on this. And then some wise heads of the Republican Party went to Nixon and said, dude, you got to step down or we're going to vote with the Democrats and impeach you. And so Nixon resigned. That's not going to happen in that way now, but I don't think it will. But I think there will be fracturing, but that fracturing is not going to happen of their own accord. It's going to happen because of what we do. Now, then we can talk about where that goes ultimately and what the actual shape of it is. But when you have sustained protests that goes on for weeks, in South Korea, they did this for, I think, 4 months. And they had already been through it once before. At a certain point, it becomes untenable. Look, it's a capitalist system, unfortunately, in my opinion. But people aren't going to invest anymore. They're not going to trade with this country anymore. Defense alignments are going to change in the world. There's all kinds of turmoil that happens here. The short answer is I don't know exactly how this is going to happen. But I do know, and I think the case can be made, that the bedrock of what has to change is the masses of people determined to not go to business as usual, willing to sacrifice. And sometimes people will do this willingly, and other times it's forced upon them. In 1970, I think it was, yes, in the spring of 70, I was driving on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and we had a U-Haul van. We were coming back from school and for the summer, and we heard they just shot people in Kent, Ohio, students protesting the war in Kent, Ohio, Kent State University. And we had this big debate, should we turn the van around and go back? And then we found that our school had already shut down, and every campus in the country shut down overnight. I'm not saying this is going to be that, but things are going to happen. And the question is, where are we going to take it? What is the demand? What is that? If we make that demand real, we're not going to stop now, you motherfuckers. We're not going to stop until you actually, that's how we felt. And some people went off in some bad directions, but we felt that way. And people were acting, and things were ungovernable. It was untenable for the ruling class of this country to continue with Richard Nixon at that, at a certain point. Not right then, a little bit later, but this is a struggle that has to be waged. The bedrock of what's going to change things is us. The power is in the people. The actual mechanisms have changed. Maybe there'll be a possibility of impeachment. Maybe they'll impeach a whole bunch of these people, but they should do by rights of the law. Let's talk a little bit more about this question of going on the offensive. The point that Sam made, if you fight this stuff one by one, you're on the defensive, not on the offensive. We have to give people a sense we got to go for the whole thing in terms of driving out the regime, or we're going to not win. And that's the stakes of that. So these are, I think, things we should talk about, and then how that can impact. We'll get a little bit later for all of society, and it does bring us to the now, not later. Because I think Sam spoke and other people spoke, including Scott at the end there. You get to the point where protest is outlawed, and then people do have to face great risk, including weapons that can get used. Okay, and that's, if we're there. We have to figure out how to fight under those conditions. But I would prefer that we actually build this movement now. Anybody who faces reality straightforwardly say, yeah, I can wait till they outlaw protests and lock down society, get rid of the courts, and we face machine guns. Maybe I'll do this now and give up my evenings and my weekday, and maybe I'll even quit school or quit work so I can join Refuse Fascism and build this movement right now. And I'll say, you know what, I've been saving for that trip to wherever. Let's put that money into something that's going to save humanity.
Join Refuse Fascism in protest at the U.S. Supreme Court, Thursday, May 15th, 9 a.m. Hands off birthright citizenship. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Trump must go now. In the first days of his rule, Trump issued an executive order stripping away the fundamental right to birthright citizenship in blatant violation of the U.S. Constitution, causing anguish and agonizing danger for millions of immigrant and refugee families. Birthright citizenship means that every person born in the United States automatically becomes a citizen of the United States. This is written into the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and was won after the Civil War to grant citizenship to formerly enslaved people. On May 15th, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments on whether nationwide temporary injunctions blocking the implementation of Trump's order, issued by federal judges in 3 states, can remain in effect, legally constraining ICE from ripping apart families while the long process of legal cases winds through the courts. If the Supreme Court overturns the nationwide injunctions, then birthright citizenship will be gone for most of the country for an indefinite period of time, opening the door to many more attacks on the rights and lives of whole groups of people. This is a blatant attack on the rule of law, on the Constitution itself, and on the separation of powers. This is the heart of a fascist form of rule. It is up to us, to the people, to say no. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. This is one of the many reasons why Trump must go now. Thanks for listening to Refuse Fascism. Organize now from Saturday, May 17th, the National Day of Protest to declare the Trump fascist regime must go now. Find and post a protest at refusefascism.org. Want to support the show? Spread the imperative and support the show by getting merch. See the show notes. Join our Patreon community to fuel refusal of this fascist nightmare over at patreon.com/refusefascism, or make a one-time donation by visiting refusefascism.org and hitting that donate button. For $0, you can support this show by sharing it with others, rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, or commenting on our socials or YouTube. It makes a difference and is so appreciated. Connect with us on social media at Refuse Fascism, including on Blue Sky, and find us on TikTok at Refuse Fascism, where fascism is spelled slightly different with Fashism to get around some TikTok rules. You can see the show notes for the exact spelling if you need help. There's a direct link in the show notes. We invite you to join us for a Refuse Fascism Zoom webinar on taking action May 15th and May 17th. We'll get more into our plans and projecting Trump must go now through coordinated days of action this May. Our Zoom is taking place this Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find a link to register in the show notes. As always, thanks to Richie Marini, Lena Thorne, and Mark Tinkleman for helping produce this episode. Be sure to visit refusefascism.org and sign up to get episodes in your inbox each week, along with updates and ways to get involved. Until next Sunday, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America.